Payback times.
The quarterly statement arrived in a crisp, cream-colored envelope, the kind that feels expensive between your fingers. I carried it to my study, the morning sun painting warm stripes across the oak floor. I poured a second cup of coffee and settled into the leather chair that still remembers the shape of my body from 20 years of different work. My home office is a testament to a life lived in details. Framed certificates from my compliance days hang beside photos of Rohan and Mira. A bookshelf holds 3-ring binders, their spines labeled in my precise handwriting. They're my old tools, retired but not forgotten. I slit the envelope with a silver letter opener. The first page was the summary. Our total balance, $487,632.18. A number that represented 30 years of careful saving and the optimistic, compounding faith of the market. Our nest egg, our buffer, Mira's potential wedding, maybe a down, payment help for her first home, our eventual quiet years. It all sat in that number. My eye didn't linger on the total. It went straight to the activity summary. Administrative fees, $2,798.12 for the quarter. I set my coffee down. The ceramic mug clicked softly against the desk pad. A fee like that would represent an annual expense ratio of... I pulled the calculator over. My fingers danced. $2,798.12 times 4 is $11,192.48, divided by the average balance. I estimated using last quarter's statement, roughly 2.3%. A quiet alarm, low and familiar, began to sound in the back of my mind. It was the same feeling I'd get 10 minutes into reviewing a pension plan's Form 5500, spotting the line item that didn't belong. ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, isn't about preventing losses. The market does what it does. It's about preventing theft, the quiet, legal-looking kind. Its core principle is fiduciary duty. Those who manage retirement money must do so solely in the interest of the participants. Prudence, diversification, reasonable fees. A 2.3% all-in fee for a standard 401k plan wasn't prudent, not even close. For a large pooled plan, you'd aim for under 0.5%. Even for a small individual rollover IRA like ours, anything over 1.5% had better come with a spectacular proven reason. I turned the page to the asset allocation breakdown. Damian Chase, our charming advisor, had sent us a cheerful email last year suggesting a strategic reallocation. I'd been preoccupied with helping Mira move, and Rohan had said he was the expert, so I'd signed the electronic documents. The breakdown showed 3 large positions. That was nearly 80% of our portfolio. Diversification is not just a buzzword, it's a safety protocol. You don't put 80% of a family's future into 3 correlated high-octane vehicles. Where were the bonds? The international equity? The simple low-cost index funds that form the bedrock of any prudent plan? A memory surfaced. A man in a too-tight suit, sweat beading at his temples. I was the federal auditor across the table. His company's pension plan was bleeding value. It's a strategic concentration, he'd insisted. High conviction plays. The spreadsheet on my screen had told a different story. The high conviction plays were all funds from the same fund family, a family that paid his firm lavish revenue sharing fees. The participants' savings were being used to buy him a new summer home. We'd nailed him on a prohibited transaction. He'd lost his license. I looked at Damien's sleek statement. The alarm, in my mind, wasn't low anymore. It was a steady, piercing tone. I reached for the phone, then stopped. A direct confrontation without data was just a complaint. He'd swat it away with jargon and charm. I needed the pattern. I stood and went to the filing cabinet. I pulled the last 2 years of quarterly statements from Chase Financial. I laid them out on the large work table in a chronological grid. The afternoon light was harsh now, showing every fiber in the paper. I started a new spreadsheet: date, total balance, stated fees, calculated annual rate. I began inputting numbers. The fees had been creeping up, almost imperceptibly, quarter to quarter, from 1.8% to 2.0 to 2.1, now to 2.3. A boiling frog strategy. Next tab, performance. I pulled publicly available benchmark data, a simple 60/40 blend of US stocks and bonds, a global market index. I charted our portfolio's growth against them over the same 2-year period. The lines diverged, not wildly, but clearly, steadily. Our line trailed the others. The gap wasn't huge in dollar terms yet, maybe 15 or 20,000, but it was a gap, and it was growing, and we were paying a premium fee for the privilege of this underperformance. Prudence. A fiduciary must act with the care, skill, prudence, and diligence that a prudent person familiar with such matters would use. Would a prudent person accept higher than average fees for lower than average results? The answer was so obvious it was laughable, or it would have been, if it weren't my family's money. My phone buzzed, a text from Rohan. Running late, curriculum meeting ran over. Pick up Thai? I typed back, sure, yellow curry extra veg. My mind were steady. This was my terrain. Uncertainty was gone, replaced by the cold, clear focus of a confirmed anomaly. I picked up the phone and called the number on the statement. It was answered on the second ring. Chase Financial Group, this is Chloe. How may I direct your call? Damien Chase. Please, it's Anaya Sharma. One moment, Mrs. Sharma. There was a click, a snippet of Vivaldi, then Damien's voice, smooth as aged whiskey. Anaya, so good to hear from you. How's the semi-retirement life treating you? No golf, Damien. Just reviewing our third quarter statement. I kept my tone pleasant, professional. Ah, excellent. Some solid movement there despite the choppy markets. The resilience of our real estate allocation is really showing its worth. That's what I wanted to talk about, I said. The fees and the allocation. The administrative fees seem quite high, and I'm seeing a heavy concentration in just a few assets. There was a brief pause. I could almost hear him switching mental gears. Anaya, I appreciate you looking so closely. That's always smart. What you're seeing is the integrated service fee that bundles my ongoing management, the financial planning software, the dedicated client service line, the whole white glove experience. It's about value, not just cost. He was using the advisor playbook, page 1. Reframe cost as value. As for the concentration, he continued, his voice gaining confident momentum. That's intentional. In today's market, diversification for diversification's sake is a relic. It dilutes returns. We're focused on high conviction, high growth potential sectors. High conviction. The same phrase. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I understand strategy, he said, my voice still calm. But ERISA guidelines are very clear on diversification as a core tenet of fiduciary prudence. Another pause, longer this time. I heard the rustle of paper. When he spoke again, his tone had cooled a few degrees. Anaya, with respect, your IRA isn't governed by ERISA. That's for employer-sponsored plans. This is a personal retail account. The rules are more flexible. My duty is to my client's stated objectives, which were aggressive growth. He was technically right. ERISA didn't directly apply, but the principles of fiduciary duty were the bedrock of any ethical financial advice. He was hiding behind a legal technicality, and he just confirmed he saw me as a retail client. He'd made his first mistake. Underestimation. I see, I said, letting a note of thoughtful concession into my voice. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to explain it, Damien. Of course, that's what I'm here for. Don't hesitate to call if anything else comes up. Give my best to Rohan. We hung up. I sat in the silent study, the spreadsheet glowing, the statements spread like evidence. He was slick, confident. He'd built a practice on being the trusted local guy. The Higgins, our neighbors, loved him. He'd probably done the same thing to them, to the Millers down the street. How many other quarterly statements in our zip code were telling this same quiet story of erosion? This wasn't just about our $500,000. It was about all of it, the collective safety net of our community, siphoned away by fees and bad bets. My gaze fell to the bottom of the statement, the small print, the investment management agreement we'd signed. I opened the PDF and zoomed in. It was standard boilerplate for the first few pages. Then, Schedule B, fee compensation. My eyes tracked down the legalese. The words blurred, then snapped into terrible focus. Advisor may receive compensation from third-party product sponsors in the form of 12B1 fees, shareholder servicing fees, or other revenue-sharing arrangements. My breath caught. There it was. The conflict of interest, laid bare. He was getting paid extra by the funds he was picking. The high-fee, concentrated funds. Every dollar of that 2.3% wasn't just for his white glove service. A chunk of it was a kickback. The Global Real Estate Trust, the structured note, they weren't just high conviction picks. They were high commission picks. He wasn't just a mediocre advisor. He was a conflicted one. His financial interest was tied to choosing the products that paid him the most, not the ones that were best for us. The final line of the clause sealed it. Client acknowledges that such compensation may create an incentive for advisor to recommend products based on such compensation, rather than the client's objectives. They'd made me acknowledge my own potential fleecing, and I'd clicked agree. A cold fury settled in my stomach, clean and precise. This wasn't anger, it was strategy crystallizing. He thought he was playing chess with someone who didn't know the rules. He didn't realize I'd written the rule book for a previous game. I closed the PDF. I saved my spreadsheet. I stacked the physical statements into a neat pile. Damien Chase had seen my last name and my role as Rohan's wife, Mira's mother. He'd seen a semi-retired woman. He hadn't seen the federal auditor. He hadn't seen the person who'd spent 2 decades learning how to find the single corrupted line in a 1,000-page ledger. He'd violated the sacred trust of a fiduciary. He'd jeopardized the security of my family and likely others. I looked at the photos on my shelf. Mira, grinning in her cap and gown, Rohan and me on that hiking trip in Vermont. This money represented the peace we'd earned, the future we'd planned. It was no longer just a nest egg. It was evidence, and I knew exactly how to audit it. The cold fury that settled in my stomach that afternoon in my study did not burn out. It fossilized. It became a core of tempered steel, around which I built a patient and meticulous architecture of observation. The quarterly statements kept arriving in their cream envelopes with embossed logos. I greeted them like old adversaries. Each one went directly to my work table before any other mail was opened. I had developed a ritual involving the silver letter opener, a fresh pour of coffee, and the definitive snap of my 3-ring binder opening. The binder was now labeled in black Sharpie, Chase Financial Review. For 2 full years, I documented everything. It was not just about the numbers anymore, though I updated my spreadsheet with a religious dedication. The gap between our portfolio performance and the prudent benchmarks widened like a slow-moving continental drift. $20,000 became $35,000, then $50,000. The fees inched up again, this time to 2.5%. Now the statement included a new line item under the integrated service fee called Portfolio Strategy and Rebalancing. I documented every conversation too. Neat and dated entries filled a separate notebook, written in my compact script immediately after each interaction. March 12th. Called regarding high concentration in the tech-linked note given market volatility. Damien's response was, "Volatility is opportunity for the strategic investor. We are holding firm." His tone was patronizing. He mentioned his new boat. August 7th. Email query about exploring lower cost index fund options. Damien's reply stated, "Anaya, you are paying for active management, not passive tracking. You get what you pay for." January 15th. Statement showed an unauthorized trade, a small position in a frontier market ETF with a 3% load. When I called, Damien called it an operational oversight by his team. He claimed he had meant to discuss it first, citing high growth potential, and offered to waive the load as a one-time courtesy. I documented the trade confirmation that showed the load had been charged. Each incident was a solitary pebble. Alone, they were mere annoyances. Together, they were beginning to form an unscalable wall. Damien's demeanor shifted in tandem with his growing local reputation. His photograph appeared in the town's bi-weekly newsletter with increasing frequency. Local advisor sponsors Little League. Chase Financial donates to library renovation. He was carefully building a brand of benevolent expertise. Our interactions became shorter, his patience for my queries visibly thinning. He had taken to calling me Mrs. Sharma again, a veneer of formality that felt like a dismissal. He saw only a persistent and slightly fussy client. He never glimpsed the archivist quietly at work. Then he overreached. My mother, Preeti, is 78. She lives comfortably on my father's pension and a modest IRA rolled over from her part-time bookkeeping years. She mentioned at a family dinner that she had run into Damien at the grocery store. Such a nice young man, she had said. He asked after you, said he could help me optimize my cash flow for peace of mind. The alarm that sounded within me was no longer familiar. It was shrill and piercing. I drove to her apartment the next morning. "Mom, what exactly did you tell him about your finances?" "Oh, nothing specific, Beta," she said, waving a hand. "Just that I sometimes worry about things getting complicated." He gave me his card, said he specializes in simplification for seniors. He mentioned an annuity that could give me a guaranteed check every month, just like a pension. An annuity for a 78-year-old woman with sufficient and straightforward assets. It was a product notorious for high commissions, brutal surrender charges, and complexity that made true simplification a cruel joke. This was a classic suitability breach, recommending an unnecessarily expensive and illiquid product precisely because it paid the advisor a fat upfront bonus. My mother's peace of mind was about to become his next down payment on a bigger boat. The steel core inside me turned white hot. "Give me the card, Mom." My voice was calm, but it was a calm that made her look at me sharply. "I want to talk to him about it first, before you do anything." She fished it from her purse, her expression now concerned. "Is something wrong, Anaya?" "I just want to make sure it is the right fit," I said, squeezing her hand. "Let me use my old work skills. Humor me." That was the trigger. The move from my family's money to my mother's crossed a line from professional negligence into predatory exploitation. My patient architecture of observation was complete. It was time to install the legal foundation. I did not call Damien. I called Elena. Elena Rossi's name had come up years earlier at a professional conference. She was a plaintiff side attorney who specialized in fiduciary breach and financial advisor malpractice. Known as a quiet storm, she was methodical, devastating, and impossible to intimidate. I had kept her plain white business card with its elegant black type tucked in the back of my professional contacts book. I never imagined I would need it for a personal fight. Her office was in the city, a 40-minute drive from our town's manicured streets. It occupied a modern building of glass and steel, a world away from Damien's cozy and wood-paneled suite on Main Street. The reception area was quiet, decorated in muted grays, with pristine white orchids. Elena herself matched the environment, sharp and elegant and profoundly efficient. She was perhaps 50, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing behind her stylish glasses. Anaya, she said, shaking my hand with a firm and dry grip. I remember your presentation on revenue sharing disclosures at the DOL conference in 2015. It was excellent. Coffee, please. Black. We settled in her conference room, which offered a serene view of the river. I placed my binder on the table between us. Not the spreadsheet printouts, not yet. Just the binder, thick and formidable. So, she began, sipping her own coffee. You believe your financial advisor is breaching his fiduciary duty? I know he is, I said, but I need to know if it is actionable, and I need to know how to make it so. Walk me through it, not as a client yet, but as a colleague. So I did. I started with the fee escalation, the concentrated and high-cost holdings, the persistent underperformance versus benchmarks. I showed her the clause from the agreement that admitted to third-party compensation. I recounted the documented calls, the dismissive tones, the unauthorized trade. Then I told her about my mother. Elena listened without interruption, taking sparse notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Okay, first, the legal landscape. You are correct that your IRA is not governed by ERISA, but that does not mean there is no fiduciary duty. At the federal level, the SEC's regulation, Best Interest, and the Investment Advisors Act impose fiduciary obligations. At the state level, we have common law fraud, breach of contract, and negligence. The fact that he holds himself out as a trusted advisor and a financial planner, rather than just a broker, significantly strengthens the fiduciary argument. Her voice was clear and pedagogical, without being condescending. This was the necessary lesson, woven seamlessly into our strategy. The signs you have described are textbook. Let us break them down for your formal documentation. She tapped her legal pad with her pen. 1. Prohibited transactions through conflicts of interest. That revenue sharing clause is pure gold. He is receiving extra compensation from the very products he selects. His incentive is not aligned with your best interest. Document every fund that has a 12B1 fee or is from a fund family known for high revenue sharing agreements. 2. Failure to diversify. Prudence 101. Your chart showing 80% in 3 correlated and volatile assets is a powerful visual. We would engage an expert witness to testify that no prudent advisor would construct such a portfolio for long-term retirement assets. 3. Excessive fees. You do not pay Porsche prices for a Toyota Corolla, especially if the Corolla is demonstrably faster. Your fee versus performance analysis is critical. We would benchmark his fees against industry standards for similarly sized accounts. 4. Lack of transparency and suitability. The annuity pitch to your mother is a gift. It demonstrates a pattern of pushing high commission products onto vulnerable clients. The unauthorized trade is a direct breach of authority. She looked at me directly. You have done the hard part, Anaya. You have been a one-woman compliance department. What you need now is to formalize everything for litigation and to expand the scope. Expand the scope? I asked. He is not doing this only to you. A man like this operates from a playbook. He uses the same lines and the same products. If he is pushing an inappropriate annuity on your mother, he has done it to others. If he is charging you 2.5%, he is charging the Higgins and the Millers the same. A class action is a much bigger threat than a single arbitration. It captures the attention of regulators. It makes his insurance carrier sweat. The concept settled over me, heavy and profound. This was no longer just about moving our money into a better account. It was about demolition. How do I find the others? I asked, very carefully. You live in a small town where word travels fast. You cannot simply start asking people if they are unhappy with Damien. Chase. That could be construed as tortious interference. But you can listen. A faint and shrewd smile touched her lips. You are a semi-retired and friendly neighbor. People talk about their finances in vague and worried ways at book club or the community garden. Listen for the cues. Phrases like, Damien says the market is too tricky for us to understand, or we are just letting the expert handle it. If someone expresses doubt, you can say, I have been reviewing my own plans closely lately. It is so important to ask questions. Leave the door open. If they walk through it, you take their contact information discreetly and send them to me. She outlined the concrete next steps. I would formally retain her firm. All communication with Damien would now flow through her office. We would send a letter formally demanding every document related to our account, every trade confirmation, every compliance memo, all his internal notes. The legal discovery process would begin. Simultaneously, I would continue my quiet and observational reconnaissance within our community. I left her office with a retainer agreement and a feeling of immense and focused clarity. The law was no longer an abstract principle. It was a toolkit, and Elena had just handed me the master blueprint. The following months became a life of dual existence. In one life, I was Anaya Sharma, Rohan's wife, Mira's mother, the woman who volunteered at the library and brought excellent biryani to neighborhood potlucks. In that life, I listened with gentle attentiveness. At a summer barbecue at the Higgins' home, Bill Higgins, a retired engineer, mentioned offhandedly that he and his wife had locked in a guaranteed income stream with Damien. Takes the worry right out, he said, sipping his beer. My blood ran cold. An annuity, I smiled politely. That is so important, peace of mind. It is good to have everything in clear writing. Later, as we helped clear plates, his wife Susan murmured to me, I just wish the statements were easier to read. All those fees. I patted her arm softly. You should always ask for clarification. It is your money, after all. I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes and said nothing more. In my other life, I was the architect. Elena's formal document request to Chase Financial yielded a deliberate flood of paper, a common tactic to overwhelm. It did not work. This was my native language. Rohan knew I was looking into things with a lawyer, primarily concerned about my mother's situation. He trusted my judgment, though I saw the constant worry in his eyes. Just do not let it consume you, Anu, he would say. It will not, I would promise, knowing it already had. The evidence dossier grew. Elena engaged a forensic accountant who analyzed the trade history. The pattern was blatant, a churn of products from a handful of fund families, all with high revenue sharing agreements. The annuity prospectus he had given my mother revealed his commission, a staggering 7%, buried on page 43. Then, the perfect moment announced itself. A thick and gilt-edged invitation arrived in our mail. The Chase Financial Group cordially invites you to a client appreciation gala and market outlook evening. celebrating your success. It was to be held at the upscale Rivercrest Country Club, featuring dinner, drinks, and a keynote from Damien on navigating the new economic reality. An RSVP was required, a public platform, a room full of his clients, his reputation, his ego. I showed the invitation to Elena during our weekly call. I could hear the smile in her voice. That is your stage. We are ready. The complaint is drafted. We can file it the next business day. But having you speak your truth to that audience right before he is exposed legally, that is uniquely powerful. It is not just about the lawsuit anymore. It is about the story. It shatters his brand completely. The week before the gala was a period of final and intense quiet. I organized the dossier into a compelling narrative. The initial discovery, the 2-year pattern of behavior, the predatory move on my mother, the evidence unearthed in discovery, the whispered concerns from Susan Higgins and another neighbor, Mark, who had agreed to speak with Elena after realizing his college savings plan for his grandchildren was stuffed with the same high-fee funds. On the eve of the gala, I was in my study, sliding the final copy of the dossier into a sleek black folder. The house was silent. Rohan was asleep upstairs. The only sound was the whisper of paper. My computer chimed softly with a new email notification. The sender was Damien Chase. The subject line read, "Looking forward to tomorrow night." I opened it. "Anaya, so pleased you and Rohan can join us at the gala. It is going to be a fantastic evening of celebration and insight. I noticed you have not yet returned the signed paperwork for the account consolidation and the updated investment policy statement I sent over last month. I do need those for my files to ensure everything is seamless. I know you have a tendency to overanalyze, a habit of your former profession, I am sure. But sometimes you just have to trust the process. That is what you hire an expert for. Let us get those signed tomorrow night. I will have a copy with me. Then you can truly relax and enjoy the fruits of our strategy." All the best, Damien. I read it twice. The condescension was so thick I could taste it, metallic and coppery like blood. A habit of your former profession. Trust the process. He was so utterly and monumentally sure of himself. He saw only a woman who needed to be managed, placated, and gently guided into signing away her right to question. He was inviting me to his victory party and asking me to hand him the knife on my way in. I did not reply. I looked at the black folder on my desk. Inside it lay the patient work of 2 years, the cold law, the damning numbers, the human stories. I closed my laptop lid. The quiet in the room was no longer empty. It was charged, like the air moments before a lightning strike. Tomorrow night, at his grand celebration, I would finally stop analyzing. I would start presenting, and he would finally learn what the process truly was. The Rivercrest Country Club smelled of polished brass, expensive perfume, and roasted beef. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto round tables draped in white linen. A string quartet played something tastefully classical in the corner. Damien had outdone himself. The room was packed with his clients, the prosperous faces of our town, the doctors and small business owners, and retired teachers like Rohan. I saw Bill and Susan Higgins at a table near the front, waving us over. Mark from down the street stood at the bar, looking uncomfortable in his suit. I carried a small, elegant clutch. Inside rested a USB drive and a copy of the complaint, filed electronically with the court and the Department of Labor at 4:59 that afternoon, just before their offices closed. Elena sat at a table near the back, a neutral observer with a perfect view. Rohan squeezed my hand as we found our seats. "You okay?" he murmured. He knew the plan, had been quiet and supportive, though I could feel the tension coiled in his shoulders. I'm ready, I said, and I was. The cold, patient focus had honed itself into a sharp and present calm. I was an auditor walking into the final meeting. Damien worked the room like a politician, clapping shoulders and laughing too loudly, his tan sharp against his white shirt. He stopped at our table, beaming. Anaya, Rohan, so glad you made it. His eyes flicked to me, holding a hint of smug challenge. He pulled a folded document from his inner jacket pocket. Brought those papers for you to sign. We can take care of it after my talk. A quick signature, and then you can enjoy dessert, worry-free. He laid them beside my plate like a mint on a pillow. I'll look them over, I said, my voice pleasant. Of course you will, he chuckled, as if indulging a child, and moved on to Glad Hand, the Millers. The dinner was a blur of bland chicken and polite conversation. I ate little, my heart a steady and powerful drum beat, in my chest counting down. Finally, the plates were cleared, the lights dimmed slightly, and a spotlight hit the small podium at the front of the room. Damien ascended the steps to a smattering of applause. He looked out over his kingdom, a master of ceremonies. Friends, clients, neighbors, he began, his voice amplified and smooth. Thank you for being part of the Chase financial family. Tonight is about you, about celebrating your success and the trust you've placed in me. He spoke for 10 minutes about market volatility being an opportunity and the importance of staying the course. It was a greatest hits album of every evasive and patronizing thing he'd ever said. I watched the nods around the room, the trusting faces. Susan Higgins nodded along, but her smile looked strained. In fact, Damien said, leaning confidentially on the podium, I want to share a quick case study, with their permission, of course. He gestured vaguely toward our table. Some of you know the Sharmas, wonderful people. A few years ago, they came to me wanting aggressive growth. They'd had some government background in finance. He gave a knowing and slightly dismissive smile that drew a few chuckles. So they had questions, lots of questions. More laughter prickled across my skin. Rohan's hand found my knee under the table, a warm and steadying pressure. But we worked through it, Damien continued. I helped them understand that true growth requires conviction, requires ignoring the noise. Today, their portfolio is a testament to that strategy. He clicked a button, and a simplistic and flattering graph appeared on the screen behind him, showing a line angling upward with no benchmark or scale. Sometimes you just have to trust the process. That was my cue, the final condescension. I stood up. The movement was smooth and deliberate. I picked up the USB drive from my clutch and the unsigned papers he'd left me. I walked toward the side of the stage, my heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. A few people at nearby tables looked up, curious. Damien, seeing me approach the steps, frowned slightly before recovering with a patronizing smile. Ah, and here's Anaya now, coming up to finally sign those papers, I'll bet. Everyone, a round of applause for a client who really does her homework. The applause was scattered and confused. I didn't stop. I walked up the 3 steps and stood beside him at the podium. The spotlight was hot on my face. I could see the room clearly now. The sea of faces, Elena's calm nod from the back, Susan Higgins leaning forward with her hand to her mouth. Thank you, Damien, I said, my voice clear. I didn't need the microphone because the room was dead silent. You're right, I do my homework. I turned to the audience. My name is Anaya Sharma. For 20 years, I was a federal compliance officer, auditing pension plans under ERISA, the law that protects retirement money. I spent my career looking for the exact kind of fiduciary breaches Damien just told you to ignore. A ripple went through the crowd. Damien's smile froze. Anaya, this really isn't the time or place for. It's the perfect place, I said, cutting him off. I held up the USB drive. You showed a graph. Let me show you what a graph with proper benchmarks looks like. I leaned past him, his body rigid with shock, and pulled the clicker from his limp hand. I ejected his drive and inserted mine. The screen went black. Then my first slide appeared. It was a clean and professional chart with two lines. One was labeled Prudent 60/40 Benchmark. The other was labeled Our Portfolio with Chase Financial. The lines started together 3 years ago. Then they diverged. Ours trailed significantly behind. A gasp and then murmurs filled the air. This, I said, my voice ringing in the quiet, is the result of paying a 2.5% annual fee for a portfolio concentrated in high cost and high commission products that consistently underperform. This is what happens when diversification, a bedrock principle of fiduciary duty, is dismissed as noise. I clicked to the next slide, a blown-up section of our investment agreement with the revenue sharing clause highlighted in yellow. This clause allows Damien to collect extra and hidden payments from the funds he chooses for you. His financial incentive is not aligned with your best interest. It's a prohibited conflict under any ethical standard. Damien found his voice low and furious. This is slander. You have no right. Get off my stage. He moved to take the clicker. I didn't flinch. I held his gaze. I have every right. The right of a client who was misled, the right of a daughter whose elderly mother was targeted for an unsuitable annuity, so you could collect a 7% commission. I turned back to the crowd, my anger a controlled and directed force, and I have the law. I clicked again to a slide titled Legal Actions Taken. Today, with my attorney Elena Rossi, I gestured to the back, and 100 heads turned. I filed a formal complaint with the U.S. Department of Labor outlining these fiduciary breaches. Simultaneously, we filed a civil lawsuit in state court for breach of contract, negligence, and fraud. I looked at Damien, whose face had drained of color, his tan now a sickly yellow under the lights. The complaint number is filed. You'll be served on Monday. The room erupted in noise. Chairs scraped. People talked and shouted questions. Bill Higgins was on his feet. Anaya, is this true? Our annuity? If Damien sold you a variable or indexed annuity inside your IRA, especially if you're over 70, I urge you to contact Ms. Rossi. Your paperwork will have similar clauses. My voice softened, turning from prosecutor to educator for the final lesson earned in the fire of the moment. If you suspect your retirement funds are being mishandled, you have steps. First, gather every statement. Second, benchmark fees and performance against simple and low-cost indices. Third, request all documents from your advisor, their Form ADV and trade confirmations. Fourth, file a complaint with the DOL's EBSA division. They investigate fiduciary breaches. Fifth, consult with a specialist attorney. ERISA allows participants to sue to recover losses. You are not powerless. Your security is not a matter of trusting a process you can't see. It's a matter of verifying the stewardship you paid for. I looked out at the sea of shocked and awakening faces. This isn't about market losses. We all accept those. This is about being systematically drained by fees and bad bets while being told it's strategy. It's about trust betrayed. I ejected my USB drive. The screen went blue. The silence was absolute. I turned to Damien, who looked like a hollowed-out version of the man who had taken the stage. All his charm and bluster had evaporated, leaving only a terrified and exposed core. The public humiliation was complete. His brand, built over a decade in our small town, had been dismantled in 10 minutes in front of everyone who mattered. I placed the unsigned papers he'd given me on the podium. I won't be signing these. I've already initiated a transfer of our assets to a registered investment advisor who operates as a true and fee-only fiduciary. I suggest you all consider doing the same. I walked down the steps. The crowd parted for me. Rohan met me at the bottom, his eyes wide with pride, and took my arm. We walked out of the ballroom as the buzz of 100 conversations exploded behind us. I didn't look back. The aftermath was swift. By Monday, the local paper had picked up the story. The Department of Labor investigation, spurred by the complaint and the sudden wave of client defections, moved quickly. Damien's assets were frozen. His insurance carrier settled the class action Elena assembled with remarkable speed, wanting to avoid a public trial. Our $500,000, plus a significant portion of the lost gains, was recovered and transferred. 6 months later, on a crisp Saturday morning, I stood at a lectern in the community center. The room was full not with tuxedos and gowns, but with jeans and concerned faces. I was leading the first of my retirement fund protection workshops. I talked about fee disclosure and benchmark comparisons and the questions to ask any financial advisor. Susan Higgins sat in the front row, taking furious notes. Bill was beside her, looking more relieved than I'd ever seen him. After the workshop, I walked home in the autumn sunlight. Leaves crunched under my feet. Rohan and Mira waited for me on the porch, a new statement from our fee-only advisor sitting on the wicker table between them with 2 mugs of tea. "Open it," Rohan said, smiling. I sat down, the familiar scent of chrysanthemums from the garden beds filling the air. I opened the envelope. The first page was simple and clean. The total balance was healthy and recovering, but my eyes went straight to the allocation. U.S. Total Market Index, International Index, Bond Index, a sliver of real estate, diversified and prudent. The fees were 25 basis points. I looked at the performance chart versus benchmark. The lines ran nearly on top of each other. Twins? We were paying for the market's return, not a salesman's. Fantasy. Mira put her hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Mom. You protected it." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of 2 years of vigilance finally lifting. The steel core had done its job. It hadn't just protected a number in an account. It had protected lazy Saturday mornings and future weddings and quiet retirements. It safeguarded the peace of mind that comes from knowing your safety net is woven with integrity, not cleverly disguised holes. I looked at my family, then at the statement. The expertise I'd honed in government offices and conference rooms hadn't retired. It had just come home. That was the most important audit I'd ever completed.